So let's get started. As usual, we begin by reciting some prayers to help us remember why we're here and have a really positive altruistic motivation for joining this class. And while reciting the prayers, you can, if you wish, visualize the Buddha in front of you. Even if it's difficult to visualize, some people have difficulty visualizing. So don't worry about having a clear, perfect picture of the Buddha. It's enough just to feel the Buddha's presence. However that works for you. Try to really feel the Buddha is with us, present, right in front of us. You can also imagine many other Buddhas and Bodhisattvas all around the Buddha. And imagine they're really happy with us for what we are doing, what they want, their deepest wish is for all living beings to become free of suffering and the causes of suffering, such as ignorance, greed, hatred, and so on, all the delusions in our mind. And they want us to have peace and happiness, every kind of happiness, all the way up to the highest happiness of enlightenment, Buddhahood. They want us to reach the same wonderful state that they have reached. And so when they do see any beings engaging in study, reflection, meditation, to try to improve their minds and bring more happiness into their own minds and into the lives of others, they're really, really happy. We're doing what they would like us to do, what will make them happy. So it's good to really feel that they are cheering for us. They are there to help us, to guide us in whatever way they can. Try to really feel this love and compassion, support coming from the Buddha and all the other Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. Okay, so let's recite the prayers. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my practice of giving and other perfections, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my practice of giving and other perfections, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my practice of giving and other perfections, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. And then to deepen that feeling of concern for all living beings, recite the 4 measurable thoughts. May all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings be inseparable from the happiness that is free from suffering. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free from attachment for friends and hatred for enemies. So then, in order to fulfill these wishes, to be of benefit to other beings and ultimately reach enlightenment to help all living beings, we need to accumulate merit or positive energy and clear away negative energy do purification. So this next prayer, the 7-limb prayer, contains the most important practices that enable us to do those two things: accumulate positive energy and purify negative energy. Reverently, I prostrate with my body, speech, and mind. I present clouds of every type of offering, actual and imagined. I declare all my negative actions accumulated since beginningless time and rejoice in the merit of all holy and ordinary beings. Please remain until the end of cyclic existence and turn the wheel of Dharma for living beings. I dedicate my own merits and those of all others to the great enlightenment. And we offer the mandala, which is a way of accumulating a lot of positive energy. We imagine the whole universe, all the beautiful, precious things that exist in the universe, and imagine it transforms into a pure land. And we offer this to the Buddha, all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, all the objects of refuge, wishing that all sentient beings could experience the Pure Land. This ground anointed with perfume, strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, 4 continents, the sun and the moon. I imagine this as a Buddha field and offer it. May all living beings enjoy this Pure Land. Idam Guru Ratna Mandala Kamne Atayami. Now we'll recite the mantra of the Buddha a few times. Try to imagine light and nectar flowing from the Buddha into yourself. And you can also imagine it going into all living beings. There may be certain people you know who are in need of special help right now. You can imagine those people in front of you and the Buddha's light and nectar flowing into them and clearing away whatever problems they may have, whatever obstacles they have, sickness and so on, and filling their minds with this beautiful positive energy, helping their minds to be more positive and helping to clear away their problems. Taya ta om mune mune maha mune soha. 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 So in case you don't already have a positive altruistic motivation for joining this class, being here, then bring into your mind whatever altruistic thought you're comfortable with. if you're comfortable with bodhicitta, the wish to become enlightened, to help all living beings, you can bring that into your mind. If you're not yet sure if you're able to reach enlightenment, if that's really what you want to do, then try to at least feel some kind of wish to be of benefit to other people and other beings, those around you and those further away around the world. And have the wish to learn something from this class that will enable you to be more beneficial to others. Okay, so once again, we are going through the Lam Rim, the stages of the path to enlightenment, using this book called The Easy Path, which is written by the first Panchen Lama. It's one of the shortest Lam Rim books. Some are very long. There's some that are even shorter than this. So this is kind of a medium length one. And yeah, so the Lam Rim takes the main points of the Buddha's teachings and arranges them in a kind of step-by-step manner that shows us what we need to do to get from where we are now, being unenlightened, all the way to the state of enlightenment or Buddhahood. And you've probably noticed I'm not really sticking exactly to the book. I'm using it as the basis, but for one thing, we don't have time to go word for word through the book. So I'm just asking you to read it on your own, and then I'm talking about the main points. But I'm also bringing in material from other sources. And that reminds me, I forgot to mention last week, because we're now on the great scope of the Lam Rim, the third main section of the Lam Rim, which is all about how to develop bodhicitta and how to follow the bodhisattva's path. And there's this little book called How to Generate Bodhicitta, teachings by this wonderful Lama, Rebirth Rinpoche. He gave these teachings in Singapore in the 90s, and we transcribed and edited them and made them into a little booklet. And so there's a PDF of this book available for you on the Thubten Norboling website, so you can download that and read that if you want to learn more about bodhicitta. Okay, so we started last week looking at this topic of bodhicitta, but I realized that I didn't really explain what bodhicitta was. I just kind of jumped into it. I kind of assumed everybody already knows that, but maybe that's not the case. So the first slide for today will give some more background information of what is bodhicitta. Okay, so could you, yeah. So bodhicitta means mind of enlightenment. And so what it is the aspiration to attain enlightenment or Buddhahood. That's the state that the Buddha attained for the sake of all living beings. So it's said that bodhicitta comes about through two aspirations. One is the aspiration to help other beings, and not just a limited number of beings, but all beings without exception, without excluding anyone. Any being, any sentient being there is, even if they do terrible things, and they're very, very deluded, we don't leave them out. In fact, they probably need more help than other people. They need a lot of compassion and love and a lot of help. So anyway, that's the idea. You see all living beings and you see that they suffer and they're confused and they're deluded, and you want to help them emerge from this deluded situation, this suffering situation. So you really want to help all living beings. That's the first aspiration, is to help others. Then you look at, what can I do to help them? What would be the best way to help them? And you realize that attaining enlightenment, bringing myself to that state of enlightenment, is the best way that I can help all living beings. So there's a lot included in bodhicitta, and this is what we're looking at now, how we actually come to that point of deciding that that's what we want to do, become enlightened for the benefit of all living beings. And there are two types of bodhicitta: aspiring and engaging. And these are compared to two attitudes that we might have about, say, wanting to go somewhere. Let's say you have the thought, I'd like to go to Tibet. So initially you might just have that aspiration. Wow, it would be great to go to Tibet and visit all those holy places where, the great masters meditated and so on. So you might have that aspiration in your mind for a long time, but not do anything about it. Just a wish in your mind. But then at some point you might decide, I'm going to do it. I'm going to go there. And then you start making your plans, booking air tickets, getting your visa, packing your suitcase, and so on and so forth. So that's like engaging. You're actually making a move to attain your goal. So in a similar way, the two types of bodhicitta, aspiring bodhicitta is thinking, I want to become enlightened to help all living beings. So you have that strong wish, that strong aspiration. And then engaging bodhicitta is when you go beyond just wishing to attain enlightenment, but you're actually doing what you need to do in order to reach enlightenment. You're engaging in the practices, and the main practices that are engaged in are the 6 perfections. So we're going to learn about those later. So engaging bodhicitta is when you're actually moving towards enlightenment by creating the causes for it. Next bullet point says, initially we have to make effort to generate this attitude. It isn't something that just arises naturally and spontaneously. We have to meditate on the different points to bring about this thought of attaining enlightenment to help all living beings. So when we're at that level, it's called contrived bodhicitta. So we meditate and think about all the different points, and then some feeling of bodhicitta will come up in our mind, but it's still contrived rather than natural and spontaneous. And then the next point says, with increased familiarity, it will arise effortlessly. So that's called uncontrived bodhicitta. So after a long time, probably not just a few months or a few years, but more probably lifetimes, contemplating these different points, then eventually, because of familiarity, you keep contemplating these thoughts, these attitudes again and again and again, and your mind just gets so familiar with them that eventually bodhicitta just arises naturally and spontaneously by itself. As soon as you see another being, or you hear about another being, or you think about another being, just naturally there will arise in your mind this this determination, I'm going to become enlightened, become a Buddha, to help this being and to help all other beings. So it just arises naturally and spontaneously. So they say it's similar to the way the thought of food arises in our mind when our stomach is empty. So, if our stomach is empty, we haven't eaten for many hours, then without trying to think about food, thoughts of food will just pop up in our mind, and we'll even find ourselves moving in the direction of the refrigerator or wherever we can get some food to eat. So that's the meaning of effortless or uncontrived, spontaneous bodhicitta. And when a person reaches that point, then they become a bodhisattva. So the meaning of a bodhisattva, the term bodhisattva, it's not just somebody who would like to reach enlightenment to help all living beings, but someone who has spent a long time contemplating the different points and got to that point where bodhicitta just arises naturally and spontaneously in their mind. So it's quite a high achievement. And they enter the Mahayana Path. So when we talk about Mahayana Path, the word path actually refers to a realization, a state of mind. It's not something you walk on, like a physical thing that you move along, but it's actually a mental thing. Your mind attains certain realizations, and there's a number of these. So you go from one realization to the next, and that's the path, your mind moving progressively from one realization to a next. So the Mahayana Path, the path that leads to Buddhahood, actually starts at that point. When you become a bodhisattva, meaning you have spontaneous, uncontrived bodhicitta. So prior to that point, we have the wish to be bodhisattvas. We have the wish to follow the Mahayana Path, which is fantastic. But strictly speaking, we don't really enter the Mahayana Path until we have uncontrived bodhicitta. Okay, so I'm not trying to discourage you, but just to show that it's not easy. It takes quite a bit of time and effort and energy. Okay, so then last week I started talking about one of the methods for cultivating bodhicitta. So bodhicitta is definitely something we can have in our mind. We can develop it in our mind. It does take time, it does take effort, but there are methods for doing so. So one method is called the 7-point cause and effect method. So we started looking at that last week. And the very first step, which is even prior to the 7 points, is equanimity, which means an even-minded attitude towards others, where we don't divide people into groups. These are the people I like, these are the people I don't like, and then there's everybody else who I'm indifferent to. So it's not that we do this deliberately and consciously, it's just the way that our mind works. And why our mind works that way is basically because of ignorance, believing there's a real self, an I, a me, that's kind of solid and objectively existing all by itself. So we just believe in that, buy into that. And then we also tend to be very self-centered. Like we feel as if I am at the center of the universe. I am the most important person in the whole world, the whole universe. Everything revolves around me. And so then we tend to look at other people from that point of view. Those who help me, who are nice to me, who make me feel good, do what I like, do what I want. They are my friends. I like them. I'm going to be nice to them. I'm going to keep them close to me. And then the other people who are opposite to that, who hurt me or who don't do what I want, who are opposite to what I like and what I want, those people we regard as enemies. Enemies is a strong word, but people we dislike, people we want to keep distant from and not be nice to, not treat them with warmth and kindness and friendliness, and we may even be rude and nasty to them. So that's another group of people. We have aversion, dislike, even anger, even hatred. So then everybody else, all the rest of the people and beings, are like strangers in the sense that we don't have strong feelings of either liking or disliking them. They're just there, but we're more or less indifferent to them. So this is our usual situation, and it's all based on ignorance, not seeing the true nature of our own self, as well as the true nature of everyone else. So this is the topic of wisdom, which we'll get to later, the sixth perfection. But anyway, this is the situation that we are in. Not that we choose to be this way, we're born this way because this is the way our mind has been, always from beginningless time. We've never emerged from this state of ignorance and confusion. So this is why we tend to put people into these different groups. So equanimity is the opposite to that. Equanimity is seeing everyone, every being, every living being as deserving of our attention, our care, our respect. So we don't leave anybody out. And it's not easy, of course, to get to that point, but it's, we can do it. We can work on it. And it's good to, start by recognizing how your mind does discriminate and is biased towards others. I remember one time when I was living in Singapore many years ago, there's a lot of stray cats living in Singapore, and I would sometimes find little kittens who were abandoned or orphaned, and I take them home and take care of them and so on. I love kittens. I find them so adorable. And so it was really easy to feel love and compassion and kindness towards little kittens. But then we also had cockroaches running around in our house and everywhere in Singapore. There's lots of cockroaches. But I had very different feelings towards cockroaches. I didn't find them adorable. And I mean, of course, you can't kind of pick them up and hug them anyway. But I would ask myself, why do I have such different feelings towards kittens and cockroaches? And I saw, well, it's basically ego. To me, to my mind, kittens are cute and they're cuddly. I just find them adorable. So they make me feel good. I like picking them up and holding them and petting them. That gives me a nice feeling. I mean, it's also nice to take care of them, especially if they're hungry and sick, and you're able to act out your compassion with these little creatures. And then cockroaches, on the other hand, I would find them kind of scary and repulsive, although, they actually don't harm you, it's not that they bite you and they're poisonous or anything like that, but there's just something about their appearance and the way they move. It's just really scary. So for me, that was a really helpful thing, just to look at, how I have very different feelings. I don't have equanimity. And so that's something I need to work on. And what helped me was contemplating some of the Buddhist ideas, for example, karma and rebirth and impermanence. And so it's due to karma that a being would be born in one type of body or another type of body. Okay, so a being is born as a kitten or a being is born as a cockroach, depending on their karma, what kind of karma they created in the past. And it's not a question of choice. They didn't choose to be in that body. It's just their karma that threw them in there. And these forms are transitory, not permanent. So the kitten isn't going to be a cat forever and ever and ever, and the cockroach isn't going to be a cockroach forever and ever and ever. They've all had previous lives. The kitten was once a cockroach and the cockroach was once a kitten, and both of them were at different times, human beings. They may have been really, really beautiful. So each form that we're born into only lasts a certain amount of time, that lifetime, and then our mind leaves that body and goes into another body. So there's no permanent being as a cockroach or as a kitten or something ugly, something attractive, something that behaves wonderfully or something that behaves horribly. These are just temporary transitory situations we find ourselves in as a result of our karma and as a result of our delusions, ignorance, and so forth. And so it just doesn't make sense to strongly identify with a being according to the form they have at that particular time. That's only a transitory, impermanent situation arising from causes and conditions, and it's going to change. And then if we think about how all sentient beings, including ourselves and everybody else, how we are circling in samsara, we're dying and being reborn in different forms again, and again, experiencing different kinds of suffering, and always under the control of delusions and karma. So thinking about that, then I couldn't find a good reason, a valid reason, why I should discriminate between kittens and cockroaches in the sense of caring about them, wanting them to be happy, wanting them to not suffer, wanting to not harm them, and so on and so forth. So it's only because of my attachment to myself and my pleasure, what feels good to me. That's not a good reason to discriminate. I also find it helpful to think about the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, how their minds see all living beings. They don't discriminate. They don't think, oh, that being is so cute, is so adorable. I'm going to pay more attention to that one. And that one is really ugly and repulsive, so I'm going to ignore them. I mean, they don't have those kind of attitudes. That's just us ordinary people who think like that. So from the point of view of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, they see everybody as dear and precious and worthy of their kindness, their care, their compassion, their willingness to just keep working to help us. So that's the ideal. And I think like that. And I think, okay, that's what I'm working towards. One day, I hope to be able to be that way. So that's equanimity. And then after equanimity, we have the meditation on how all beings have been our mothers. So I talked about that last week. And then the next step is reflecting on the kindness of our mothers. So that's number 2 in the 7 points. And hopefully your own mother was kind, so you can think of her and reflect on what she did for you when you were, especially when we were small. And if you didn't receive kindness from your own biological mother, you could think about other mothers that you may have observed who were really kind and caring to their children. Or you could think of somebody else in your life from whom you received that kind of care and kindness, motherly love. So these are just a few examples. There's lots of others, but it's really good to do this meditation, especially if you can think of your own experiences with your mother. Although, remember, we can't actually remember, most of us anyway, we can't remember being born and being an infant. I don't think people have that kind of memory. Our memory only starts later when we're maybe 3-4 years old. But we can still use our imagination. We can imagine our mother at that point in time, imagine ourselves as this teeny little creature, so helpless, so vulnerable, sleeping most of the time, waking up, crying, hungry, drinking milk from her breast, and then again falling asleep, and so on and so forth. So taking care of a tiny baby is, I mean, just from what I've observed, it's like a full-time job. You're just totally occupied all day taking care of this little creature, feeding, changing their diapers, changing their clothes. And even during the night, what I hear is the baby wakes up every couple of hours, crying, hungry. And so you don't even get a good night's sleep. You have to wake up. You have to get up every couple of hours to feed your baby. So quite exhausting, quite demanding. Yeah, so to think of our mother and what she did for us, it's really, really helpful. Okay, so our mother's kindness actually starts when we're in her womb. Just because this body, it's really good to think about where this body came from. Right now, we're big and fully developed and we're able to take care of ourselves. But once upon a time, way back, right after conception, we were just this microscopic, I think they call it a zygote, fertilized egg. Can't even see it with the eye, it's so tiny. And then that attached itself to the inside of our mother's womb and then started growing from there. So that's how we started. That's the only way that a human body can exist. They can't be produced in laboratories or factories. The only way is in the womb of a human mother. So just that alone, just the fact that she kind of offered her womb to us so that this body could grow and we could have a life. So just that itself is already an act of kindness. And during the time of pregnancy, mothers sometimes experience pain, discomfort, difficulties, challenges. They sometimes have to stop doing things that they might like to do, like, I don't know, going to the gym or jogging, things that might be harmful to the baby. And they might have to do things they don't really want to do. Like my mother told me, her doctor advised her to eat yogurt, and she hated yogurt, but she would force herself to eat yogurt because it was good for her babies. That's just one example, but mothers often have to make adjustments to their lifestyle and their likes and dislikes out of concern for the baby. And then also not having an abortion. I mean, that is an option. One guy that I know once talked about how when his mother was pregnant with him, they were actually twins. He had a twin brother. So when the mother was pregnant with these two babies, she seriously contemplated having an abortion. And then I don't remember the whole story, but in the end, she decided not to. But just thinking about that, how, wow, this wonderful young man who's so many good qualities and he's doing so many good things, he almost didn't come into existence. If his mother had decided to have an abortion, then he wouldn't be there. He wouldn't be here with us. So we could think that about ourselves as well, that, we wouldn't be here if our mother had decided to have an abortion. I mean, we would be somewhere else. Mine would have been born in some other body, but maybe not such a fortunate one as we have now. So just the fact that she willingly bore us in her womb for those 9.5 or 10 months, went through that experience and gave birth to us, is itself an act of kindness. And then giving birth to us, that involves quite a bit of pain and also danger. It still happens even now that things can go wrong in the process of giving birth, and mothers might die, the baby might die. It still happens, even with all the incredible advances in medical technology and so on and so forth. things can still go wrong. So it is kind of a dangerous, risky situation of giving birth to a baby. So again, just thinking about our mother going through that for our sake. Then we're this tiny little baby and need a lot of care every single day. I mean, the only time she gets a break is when we're asleep. Otherwise, when we're awake, you know, we need to be fed and we need attention. Yeah, you can't just feed the baby and put them back in the crib and ignore them. That's actually not good. Scientists say, you know, that we need, as a small baby, we need that interaction with people. And it's usually the mother who does that, you know, talks to us, holds us in her arms, plays with us, smiles, laughs. So the baby needs that for their brain to develop properly. So again, a lot of time and energy taking care of our needs. Also, another thing that's interesting to think about is mothers don't get paid for the work that they do. There's no salary, there's no wages. Usually people don't do work unless they get paid for it. And that's not completely true. Some people do volunteer work, but this is a volunteer job. Being a mother is totally voluntary, no wages. It's a work of love. You know, most mothers would probably say, I don't want money for doing this. I love my children. I adore my children. I'm happy to take care of my children. You know, I don't want to be paid for it. I'd probably be horrified at that idea. And then, you know, as we're growing older, we have other needs as well, such as learning things. So our mother is also like our first teacher, teaching us how to talk, for example, and then how to move around, how to move our bodies, sit up, crawl, and then walk, and so on, how to dress ourselves, how to eat with a spoon and a cup, and so on and so forth. And, you know, we're slow learners. It takes time to learn how to do those things. So it requires quite a bit of patience. And sometimes we make a big mess. I remember in one Dharma center, there was a couple with a little baby, and they would be sitting at the dining room table, and the baby would be in a high chair next to them. And there was just food all over the place. You know, the baby's face was covered with food, and the clothes covered with food, and the floor all around the baby just completely covered with food. I like things to be nice and neat and tidy. So you have to give that up if you're a parent. But anyway, yeah, teaching the baby. So the things that we first learn, which are important things, you know, it is important to learn how to talk and walk and dress ourselves and brush our teeth and so on. So it's usually our mother who does those things. So, and then even when we're older and we start going to school and so forth, she's usually still there for us, ready to help, taking us to school, picking us up afterwards, washing our clothes, helping us with our homework, making our meals, and so on and so forth. And emotionally, you know, if we've been bullied, or you know, someone who was our friend is now our enemy and we're crying. So she's usually there for us to help us in whatever way we need. And even into adulthood. I mean, I don't know about all mothers, but my mother had 5 children, and even when her children were grown up, many times they would run home to mom. Relationship problems, financial problems, depression, and so on and so forth. So she was always there, patient, unconditionally loving, and ready to help her kids right up to the end of her life. So mothers are amazing. And I know from myself, and I think for many other Westerners, especially, because we often have problems with our mothers, conflicts with our mothers. So this meditation can be so healing to realize, wow, what my mother did for me can often bring lots of tears. I remember the first time I heard this meditation, I was just bawling. I never thought about these things before. So thinking about these things just made me go, oh my God, I've been so mean to her. I didn't appreciate her. And I immediately wrote this letter to my mother, thanking her for all the things that she did. Yeah, so it really can be so helpful to clear up problems that we might have with our mothers. Yeah. So we start with our mother of this lifetime, and then the point is to get a sense of gratitude and appreciation, and that really opens up our heart, enables us to feel more loving and compassionate. But then, because of the previous point where we thought every being has been my mother, and of course that's difficult, that's challenging, but we're advised to just keep meditating on that until we get it, until we do see every living being as our mother. And then you do the same meditation with them. And so they say, start with your father. Think about your father and think, well, okay, he was my father in this life, and he also helped me a lot. But he was also my mother in some other life. He was my mother, and he did all those things for me. Contemplate that, and then go on to think of other people in your life, relatives, friends, neighbors, strangers, and even enemies. They have all been my mother. They have all been kind to me. So if we, really spend time with this meditation, with this contemplation, it's very, very powerful to open our heart to every living being. And Tibetans, people who have contact with Tibetans are often really struck by how kind and warm and friendly they are. I mean, that's a generality. There may be exceptions to that, but most Tibetans are incredibly kind. And so I think this idea has, permeated Tibetan culture. Most Tibetans recite prayers, and in many of the prayers, there's this phrase, Ma Sentient Tamche, which means all mother sentient beings. So even if they don't do a whole lot of meditation, but just to recite that phrase a number of times every day, all mother sentient beings, all mother sentient beings, all these beings around me and all over the world, they have all been my mothers. Yeah. So I think that's probably the source of the kindness and compassion and friendliness and warmth that is so much part of Tibetan culture, Tibetan society, just the Tibetan way of being. So it's a beautiful idea. So now let's move on. The next point in the meditation is wishing to repay the kindness. So in a way, this is something that arises naturally. So the first bullet point says, this feeling arises naturally when we understand the kindness we have received from others. Somebody's nice to us, somebody cares for us, especially when we really need it, we naturally feel this gratitude. And with that comes this sense of, responsibility, or just like it's the right thing to do to repay their kindness. If that person is ever in trouble, ever needs help, we would not hesitate, but help them whatever we can. Okay, so the next bullet point says, okay, so how to repay the kindness? of sentient beings. So one way is just treating them with kindness, being nice to people, helping them when we can, being attentive to their needs and wishes, and not doing anything hurtful to them, and instead doing what we can to help them as much as we can. So that's just like in this present life, helping others. But then, in the context of the Buddhist teachings on samsara, cyclic existence, like we meditated on in the previous section of the Lam Rim, the middle scope, and contemplating how just as we are stuck in this situation of samsara, the cycle of birth, death, suffering, going through these same painful experiences over and over and over again under the control of delusions and karma. So just as we contemplated that with regard to ourself during the middle scope section of the Lam Rim, and then we generate this determination to be free of this situation, to get ourselves out of this situation. So now we apply that to other sentient beings, and we think, well, they, just like me, they are in samsara, cyclic existence, dying and being reborn and suffering over and over and over again. Wow, that's terrible. This is a terrible situation. So if we really want to repay their kindness, really want to benefit them, then, that's what we need to do. We need to help them get out of this situation, help them be free of samsara. And then also when we find out about Buddhahood, enlightenment, which is even higher, even beyond freedom from samsara, beyond liberation, beyond nirvana, Buddhahood, that's the most perfect state that's possible. Then we feel, well, that's what we need to do. We need to get them to enlightenment, help them reach enlightenment. That's their potential. They have that potential to reach enlightenment. And as long as they're not yet enlightened, they haven't yet fulfilled their potential. So that's what I want to do. So these are the thoughts that one develops with regard to others. Then the next step, number 4, is love. And it's a specific kind of love. It's sometimes called affectionate love or heartwarming love. So it's explained as love that sees all sentient beings as endearing, like the love a mother has for her small child. So in general, love in Buddhism is the wish for others to have happiness in its causes. So it's something we already do feel when there's a specific person or being that we care about, we see as deserving of our love. Then love is that aspect of wanting them to be happy. I mean, naturally, it's something that arises naturally, especially if you're a parent and you have children, or if you're a pet owner and you have a pet, we want that being to be happy, to have what they need to be happy, starting with food and comfort and protection and so on and so forth. So we want them to be happy. So that's the meaning of love. Love is the wish for others to have happiness. So ideally, we cultivate this for all living beings. We don't leave anyone else. We don't exclude anyone out from this feeling of love. And again, this particular kind of love, in the context of the 7-point cause and effect method, is called affectionate love. In Tibetan, it's Yiwongi Champa. Champa is the word for love, and Yiwong has the meaning of beautiful or attractive, appealing. So a literal translation would be love that sees beauty, love that sees the object as beautiful, as attractive, as appealing, which is what happens with a mother, you know. I'm not a mother myself, but just look, when I see mothers with their little babies, I mean, sometimes to me, the baby doesn't actually look that cute, kind of ugly, but like the mother's eyes, you know, you can see, she just sees her baby as the most beautiful thing in the world, the most beautiful thing in the universe. It's just like, for her mind, it is beautiful and wonderful and precious and dear. And she just, yeah. So that kind of attitude of seeing the other as beautiful and wonderful and precious and dear, okay, that is the meaning of this kind of love. And so some people, you might wonder at this point, well, what's the difference between love and compassion? Compassion is the next point we'll get to, but love is more focusing on the need for happiness, the wish for happiness. Other beings want to be happy, they wish to be happy. And so we accept that, acknowledge that, and we too want them to be happy. We want them to be happy as well. Whereas compassion is more aware of suffering, understanding that nobody wants to suffer. Sentient beings do not want to suffer. They don't want any pain or problems. So compassion is wishing others to be free of suffering. So they're quite similar. They're quite close. And in fact, I just read something recently. The Dalai Lama said that love and compassion are two aspects of the same thing. So we could think of them as two sides of a coin. You can't really have one without the other. And they also say there's no definite order in which one you develop, whether you develop love first or you develop compassion first. There's no specific way of doing it. I like to think you develop both at the same time, but there are different meditations, different ways of meditating to develop love and to develop compassion. It does take energy. We do have to put energy and time into it. But if we can understand the benefits of love, then that will inspire us, enthuse us to practice it. So there's a list of these benefits. And some of these are mentioned in traditional Buddhist texts, but some of them are also verified by research. So there's been research done on compassion and also on kindness. Yeah, I think there's also been research done on kindness. And so the research shows that, yeah, these are good for us. So our mind will be happy and our body will be healthy. So it's actually has health benefits if we can have more love and compassion. We will be loved by others. Other people will love us. Who doesn't want that? Don't you want people to love you and help you and protect you? So when we need help, don't we want people to be there for us? Well, if we can be loving ourselves, naturally people will want to help us and protect us. It helps us to sleep well at night, to have pleasant dreams and wake up refreshed. So if you have sleep problems, try meditating on loving kindness before going to bed. Our appearance will be radiant, relaxed, and we'll be able to communicate easily with other people. Look at the Dalai Lama. He goes all over the world, meets with all kinds of people of other religions, politicians, scientists, and even just ordinary people in the street. And he's just able to communicate with everybody. So it really breaks down barriers between oneself and others. And then for our meditation practice, having more love and compassion will help our mind to be more calm, and our concentration will be better because our mind won't be so disturbed by anger and irritation and worry and anxiety. So it'll be easier to concentrate. And then more efficient. So when we have to do some job, some task, we'll be able to focus on it and do it well, rather than, again, our mind being agitated with negative thoughts. And then at the time of death, we'll be able to have a more peaceful mind and a clear mind and a positive mind. If we make ourselves familiar with love and compassion during our life, and that becomes kind of our default mode, then it'll be so easy to feel love and compassion at the time of death. And that's the best way to die. Best state of mind. This is what Lama Zopa Rinpoche says again and again. The best state of mind to have at the time of death is compassion and love. So we can't wait until then to start figuring out how to have compassion and love. We have to start now and increase our love and our compassion as much as we can. And then it'll just be easy to have that in our mind as we die. And that will enable us to have a fortunate rebirth. So how we develop love, the practice is to bring to mind individuals, starting with the ones that we find easy to like. Yeah. And so think of someone, a friend or family member or a pet. And then imagine that person in front of you, and then just contemplate, this person wants to be happy just as I do. May they be happy. Really generate that wish for the other person to be happy. I also find it helpful, and Lama Tsong Khapa mentions this as well in his Lam Rim Chenmo, to think of the things that will make them happy and imagine giving them those things. Giving them the food they like to eat, beautiful flowers, a nice place for them to be, and so on. And imagine them looking happy. You're actually making them happy. And then you feel, oh, that's very nice. I feel good too. When we make other people happy, we feel happy too. That's good for us. So start with the easy ones, and then move on to strangers, people who are a little more distant from you. Get more familiar with the practice with them. Then move on to the difficult ones. People you find annoying, irritating, not easy to like. So you move from the easier to the more difficult gradually. Okay, so the next one, number 5, is compassion. This is step number 5. So as I mentioned already, compassion is wishing others to be free of suffering and the causes of suffering. So again, this is something we all have. We all do feel compassion at certain moments when we become aware that somebody is suffering, whether it's physical suffering or mental suffering. When we become aware of somebody's suffering, it touches our heart. We feel moved. And we want to relieve their suffering. We want to stop their suffering. Well, we want them to be free of that suffering. And we may even feel motivated enough to do something, to reach out, put our hand on their shoulder, talk to them, ask them if there's something we can do or whatever. Now that's compassion. Now here it says the causes of suffering. So the causes of suffering, this is what we learned during the previous section of the Lam Rim, the middle scope. Causes of suffering are mainly delusions or afflictive states of mind, starting with ignorance. That's the very root of all suffering, root cause of suffering. And then the other afflictive emotions, attachment, aversion, and so on. So it's good to really spend time in the middle scope contemplating that, understanding what are the causes of suffering. Because ideally, we wish others to be free, not just from immediate suffering that they're experiencing here and now in this life, but we want them to be free of the causes of suffering. Because if they're not free of those, then they'll just keep running into suffering again and again and again. So it's much more profound to wish them to be free of the causes of suffering. Yeah. So what I contemplate is, may they be free of ignorance, may they be free of attachment, anger, and also karma. Another cause of suffering is karma, especially non-virtuous karma, killing and stealing and so on and so forth. And so as long as people and living beings continue to do those kinds of actions, they are creating suffering for themselves. So they're creating the cause to experience yet more suffering in the future, which is really, really tragic. So this is ideally what we bring in to our contemplation on compassion. So the next bullet point says, it arises naturally when we see or hear of, I already mentioned that, I already talked about that. Something we do have naturally. And then the third bullet point says, great compassion. So this expression, great compassion, which you hear or read about sometimes. So great compassion is when we wish all sentient beings to be free from all types of suffering. So our usual experiences of compassion usually just arise towards certain individuals with certain types of suffering, obvious suffering, which is the first of the three types of suffering that we learned about in the middle scope. So the three types of suffering are suffering of suffering, that's obvious suffering, physical and mental. Everybody notices that. And then the second is the suffering of change, which is samsaric pleasure that is transitory, impermanent, it doesn't last. So it's still a kind of suffering, although instead of using the word suffering, better to say unsatisfactory. It's not completely satisfying. It's like a rainbow, it's like cotton candy. You know, it gives you a little bit of pleasure, but then it disappears and you're still dissatisfied. So it's not genuine, long-lasting pleasure. So that's the second type of suffering. Then the third type of suffering is just being in samsara, having body and mind that are under the control of karma and afflictions and not free of karma and afflictions. So that's a much deeper form of suffering that's more difficult to understand. We really have to contemplate to understand that. But ideally, we do contemplate all three types of suffering and understand that sentient beings are afflicted by all of those types of sufferings, and we want them to be free from all of those types of sufferings, not just the obvious gross forms of suffering. And also it's towards all sentient beings, not only a limited number of sentient beings. So that's the meaning of great compassion. Great compassion. So that's what a bodhisattva develops. And it's not easy, it takes time. In fact, recently we've been having teachings on the Pramanavartika by Dharmakirti, one of the great classics of the Indian, the Nalanda tradition. And in there he talks about the Buddha and how the Buddha became a Buddha. And one of the main factors was compassion. And so he talks about how the Buddha developed compassion. He made himself familiar with compassion for many lifetimes until it became great compassion. Yeah, so it does take time, lifetimes, to familiarize oneself with compassion and get to that point where it is great compassion extended to all sentient beings equally without leaving anybody out. And it also is with respect to all the different types of suffering and not just the gross, obvious ones. And also great compassion isn't just wishing sentient beings to be free of suffering, but feeling, I want to free them from suffering. So there's a sense of, we're starting to have a sense of responsibility. So again, it's similar to the feelings parents have towards their children. When a couple brings a child into the world, they have this sense of responsibility that the child's happiness and well-being and freedom from suffering is their responsibility. I am going to take care of my child and not leave it up to other people. So with great compassion, we're starting to feel that way. So we're almost out of time. Let's just quickly look at the next 2 points, and we'll look at them more later next time. So number 6 in this process is called the exceptional attitude. Sometimes it's called universal responsibility. So this arises after spending a long time cultivating love and compassion for all beings. You reach the point where you want to take on the responsibility of freeing them from suffering and bringing them happiness. So you feel, I want to do it. I want to take on that responsibility of giving happiness to all sentient beings and freeing them from suffering. And then that in turn leads to number 7, which is bodhicitta. Bodhicitta is where you think, okay, what can I do? How can I do this? How can I give happiness to all sentient beings and free them from suffering? As long as I'm just an ordinary unenlightened being, I can't. I'm not able to do it. Only a Buddha is able to help all sentient beings in those ways. And so then you make that determination. I will become a Buddha to be able to benefit all living beings. So that's bodhicitta. So you see, there's a step-by-step progression. And if you really follow those steps and meditate on them and develop those states of mind, then you get to that point where bodhicitta arises kind of naturally. But it also requires understanding what it means to be a Buddha. And there's some information about that in the Lam Rim, in the section on refuge. What are the qualities of a Buddha, the abilities of a Buddha? But there's a lot more details in the philosophical texts. For example, Maitreya's text, The Ornament for Clear Realization, the Abhisamayalankara. There you have a lot of information about, what it means to follow the path, the Bodhisattva's path, what a Bodhisattva actually does as they progress along the path, and the qualities they develop, and how that culminates in Buddhahood. So it's just like, wow, it's so amazing what a Bodhisattva does, and what they develop in their mind, and then a Buddha, when you actually become a Buddha, what you are able to do, what you know, your qualities, and so on and so forth. So it's important to try to make that kind of study so that you do have a better understanding of what is a Buddha and how a Buddha is able to help sentient beings. And then it becomes much more clear that that's the way to do it. If you do want to help sentient beings, that's the way to do it. So we've kind of gone through these points quickly. And yeah, if you have questions, you can send them in. And next week, we'll look at another method for cultivating bodhicitta. So I'd like you to read, if the next slide has your homework, the next chapter in the Easy Path, chapter 7, explaining another method for developing bodhicitta. And if you can, do some meditation. But I thought, since we have 7 sessions in this part of the course, we could focus on one of each of the 7 points during the 7 sessions. So for this week, if you could meditate on the kindness of mothers, thinking of your own mother, thinking of other mothers you've observed. Maybe you yourself have been a mother, so you have firsthand experience of what it means to take care of a child. So contemplate that to get a deeper understanding of the kindness of mothers. And Venerable Dundrup will be leading a meditation tomorrow morning. You can find out more about that from the Thubten Ling website. Okay, so we've just finished our time, but let's take a few more moments to do a dedication of the merit, the positive energy. Sorry. So really feel that it's been fortunate to spend this time looking at the method for developing bodhicitta, having a better understanding of bodhicitta and the path of a bodhisattva. So we've definitely created merit, positive energy during this session. So now let's dedicate it for the benefit of all living beings. Share this merit with all sentient beings to bring them happiness and relieve their suffering. Due to the merits of these virtuous actions, may I quickly attain the state of a Guru Buddha and lead all living beings without exception into that enlightened state. May the supreme jewel bodhicitta that has not arisen arise and grow, and may that which has arisen not diminish, but increase more and more. And also praying for the long lives of our precious spiritual teachers, especially His Holiness the Dalai Lama and Lama Zopa Rinpoche, who are examples of bodhicitta and bodhisattvas. So they're with us in this world. We can see what it's like, what it means to have bodhicitta. So may they stay with us as long as possible. Incomparably kind and supreme Tenzin Gyatso, the wish-fulfilling, wish-granting jewel, source of every benefit and happiness in this world, may you have a long life and all your holy wishes be spontaneously fulfilled. You who uphold the subduer's moral way, who serve as the bountiful bearer of all, sustaining, preserving, and spreading Manjunath's victorious doctrine, who masterfully accomplish magnificent prayers honoring the three sublime ones, Savior of myself and others, your disciples, please, please live long. So thank you. Have a good week and see you next week.